In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace rear struts on a Jeep Renegade, located in the rear fender well. So before removing the rear struts, if you start in the right rear before you do the left rear, be aware that the evap canister has to come down once you take the fender liner out. And it's a 10mm socket, and there's 3 mounting screws, or shall I say nuts. Once you remove that, you have clear access to that upper strut mount to the body. Remove the tire, and it is a 17mm socket. And these are like studs, not lug nuts. So be careful on the last one. See how they're formed? I'm going to end up leaving one in. And then now my hands are free. And I'm going to just back it off a little bit. Make sure that this will break free from the hub. There we go. Now support it. Take it out. So to take this fender liner off, you're going to need a Phillips screwdriver, a 10mm socket or wrench, and a pair of like pinch nose like trim tools. But we're going to start from the rear and work our way around. Take that out. Now we can move around the inner fender. Take a pair of plastic pinchers. Pinches and pull this plastic piece out. Move down to the next one. Looks like there's 3 of these. And one more. Grab that Phillips again. Now we'll grab our 10mm socket. We'll start here. One last one. So I see 4 total of the 10mm plastic socket. All right, now we're going to grab that fender well and just pull. So if you look at the strut and look at the front going forward, you're going to see the electronic harness for the electric caliper. We're going to pull that right out of that bracket, swing it aside, and now the ABS cable. We'll just pull that right out, set that aside. Then you'll see the flex hose going into a bracket. It has a little metal spring there, so you get a pair of needle nose pliers, something to pull that out. There we go. Anyway, just set it aside. And now we're going to try to pull this flex hose out. All right, now we're all clear of the items attached. We can move on to the mechanical stuff like the sway bar link. Sway bar link. So I'm going to take an 18mm wrench, and on the back of this sway bar link is a nice little cutout so that grabs it. 18mm socket, and I'm going to reverse and take this nut off. Pull that link right out of that strut housing. And that's all we need to do is undo the top. So now we're going to get to the bolts that hold the strut to the knuckle, and the nut is a 16mm wrench or socket, and the inverted Torx, that's an E18. top and bottom. There's two complete that we have to take out. So let's move them. There's one. And then one more down below. Now I'm going to separate that from the knuckle just by giving it a little wiggle. And now we're going to undo the top mount. There's 3 inverted Torx, and that is an E14. So inverted Torx socket, and there's 3 mounts, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to take the first front one out. And then I'm going to go to the back, take this one. And last one, I'm going to make sure my hands are free. And support it at the same time. Grab both hands and slide it out. Now we're going to take the new strut assembly and bring it up. Line up those 2 stud markings. That. I'm going to grab one bolt, set it by hand. Put the next one in. One more in the front. Okay, I'm going to grab the E14 and I'm just going to snug it up because I'm going to torque it to factory spec, so I don't want to over tighten it. I'm just going to let it snug up. Okay, now we can move on to the knuckle. So I'm going to grab that strut, bring it into that knuckle, and line it up. I'm going to have to move it a little bit, get that bolt ready to go through. There we go. Put the bottom one in first, a little bit easier. So now I'm going to push in at the top of the rotor, get that lined up, start the nut by hand, do the same on the bottom. I'm going to get my 60mm wrench and my E18 socket. I'm going to snug these up before I torque them. Pushing in. Make sure that doesn't get crushed. Snug up the bottom. Now I'm going to put on that sway bar link last. Put it right through that bracket, put the nut on, and that's an 18mm socket and an 18mm wrench. Put the wrench on the back, find that hex, and snug this up. Now I'm going to go get my torque wrench and torque everything to spec. So the knuckle to strut lower bolts are torqued to 74 foot-pounds, then an additional 90 degrees. So I'm going to put my 16mm wrench, my E18 socket, and let's go ahead and torque it to 74 foot-pounds. Let's do the bottom one before we do the 90 degrees. Now I'm going to change my torque wrench to degrees. 90 degrees is what I'm looking for. Let's turn it an additional 90. Now I'm going to torque the sway bar to strut, and that's 18mm wrench on that back hex, 18mm socket, and it is 59 foot-pounds. Now we're going to torque the last bit of the strut, and is the upper strut mount to body. And that's an E14 socket, and it is 37 foot-pounds. Double check. So let's grab that flex hose and put it back in the bracket. Slide that rubber spacer in, right in that groove, pull it all the way in. Now I'm going to get the ABS sensor, put that in its preset groove, and now the harness for that electric caliper. I'm just going to transfer that little spring over. Mine's still together, it's not broken. Just make sure that that doesn't slide out, because that could be kind of catastrophic if that was to come out and that line was to hit the tire. So I'm going to get a pair of needle nose and just pull that right up. There we go. Bring the fender liner back up. Make sure you get it behind all the flares, the outside flare. I'm going to line the inside up first. Make sure I get it behind the flare. There's one. Make sure you bring it around. Get it in there. Let's bring it around here first. Next. Get that stud on over here lined up. There's also a stud down below here. Oh, there it is in the front. Find this one. Right there. There we go. 1, 2. And then there's one in here. Last one to line up. Perfect. So now I have the plastic nuts that are a 10mm socket. And I'm going to just start them by hand. Go all the way around. You'll see that pre-marking, like where it's sat for a long time. Try to line that up. Get my 10mm socket. Try to line it up with that. And then there's one right down here. And then our last plastic nut right there. I actually pulled everything together nicely in there. So now we can get our plastic push pins. There's 3 of them. Line them up. I'm just going to put the base part of them in first, then I'll put the centers in. That expands them. And now we've got our Phillips head screws. So I'm going to get the screw from below first. Last one. Now, before I put the tire on, I want to give you a quick tech tip, and that is these backing plates. Whenever you're working in the fender well on something, you have a tendency to push on them and pry. So before you put the tire on, give it a good little push back and make sure they're not hitting that rotor. If you have freedom to spin it, make sure there's no metal sound, and then you won't hear that noise after. You should be good to go. Now we're going to mount the tire. There we go. Grab one of those studs, start it by hand. Then I'm going to take my 17mm in a crisscross or a star pattern. I'm going to just snug them up before I torque them. Now I'm going to lower it and torque it to factory specs. Now with the 17mm socket, I'm going to torque my wheels to 89 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Double check. Now take it for a road test. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.